Ever since that tantalizingly brief opportunity we had to play as General Leo, only to have him brutally taken from us a moment later, players have toiled endlessly to find some secret way of getting him back. Maybe there's some way he can escape town. Maybe, if you wait long enough, Kefka will give up and go away. Maybe if you kill enough dinosaurs to drive them to extinction, their collective souls will be worth the exchange for this one man. Eventually, the game's entire code was disassembled, and it was discovered, you can't. He's gone. There is nothing else hidden in the code involving Leo, aside from one dummied line from Shadow indicating that Kefka was out to kill him. Final Fantasy VI never had any intent for the player to have access to Leo outside of his single scene in Thamasa. Intent being the key word here. It's true that there is no scripted event to save Leo or get him back, but there are steps the player can take to get him in the party anyway. This video was originally just going to be about how to get him in the party in the Pixel remaster, but I realized my explanation was making too many references to the Super Nintendo method, to the point that I might as well just explain that one too, and throw in some other methods for good measure. Therefore, this video is now the one-stop resource on all the ways you can get General Leo in your party. If this is going to be an all methods video, I might as well get this one out of the way first. The sketch glitch. You may have heard kids in the 90s swear up and down that their game bugged out and they got General Leo in their party. And they may have actually been telling the truth. This glitch only appears in the original version 1.0 shipment of the English SNES cartridges, but it was corrected later in the 1.1 release. Therefore, if you want to attempt this glitch, you need to make sure you're running 1.0, or it won't work. The sketch glitch has all sorts of different effects depending on the circumstances, and may corrupt your save files, so experiment with caution. To get the glitch to specifically give you General Leo, do the following. First, you need a character to know Mute. Then, you need to arrange your spells so that Mute is in the 28th position in their in-battle spell list. Note that the in-battle spell list truncates some empty spaces, so it may not be in the same position as it is in the magic menu. If you have a full or mostly full spell list, Magic Order 3 in the config menu will put Mute in position 28. If you're still in the World of Balance and only have those spells, Magic Order 4 might position it better. Once you've got that set up, put the character who knows Mute in the first party position and turn them into an imp. Next, get into a battle with any of the enemy arrangements in the grassy area between Narshe and Figaro. It doesn't necessarily have to be these enemies in particular, just an enemy that uses Mold 1, which is generally an arrangement of small-sized enemies. If you're in the World of Ruin, most of the enemy formations that spawn on the island with Doma also use Mold 1. Once the battle starts, cast Vanish on an enemy, have Realm sketch it, and watch chaos ensue. Now, this is unfortunately just Leo appearing on the screen. If you run from the battle and check your menu, you will see he is not actually in your party. So this isn't really a way to get him in your party, it's just temporarily summoning him through dark magic or something. Keep watching for more stable and usable ways to get him. Or enjoy your pile of dirks. So, say you don't want to just make an apparition of Leo appear on the screen. Say you want to be able to take him to dungeons and use shock and hit things 4 times. Well, you're in luck, because you can do that too. This time, we're going to be using the airship glitch. This method was first demonstrated in 2011 by Elephant Gun in their Let's Break Final Fantasy VI series. In their original method, General Leo was only usable in the World of Balance, before the Floating Continent, and therefore didn't have much to do. But there is now a modified version that allows Leo to be transported to early in the World of Ruin, expanding the scope of his use. Hang on tight, this is going to be a long one. First, start a new game and play until Kefka arrives at Figaro Castle for the first time. When Kefka leaves, have Edgar follow him out the door, onto the overworld, and then save. Now you need to play the game normally until the Floating Continent. But there's a catch. You need to play the game from here to the Floating Continent without saving. This is about 9 hours worth of playtime. And if you die along the way, you'll need to start over from here. If you're running the game on an emulator, you can use save states to save your progress, but the last time you enter the save menu and save your game needs to be right here. So, fast forward 9 hours, and we're now on the floating continent, just before the fight with Atma Weapon. You have the option to return to your airship, and you need to take it. Once you're back on the airship, go to the controls and select Lift Off. Then, return to the airship deck, go to the controls, and select Find the Floating Continent. When you return to the floating continent, after all that effort, you need to die. Sorry. And when you die, your save from all the way back at Figaro Castle at the beginning of the game will load. But wait, what's this? Your save reloaded with you on the airship. This is why we needed to play to the floating continent. Because the floating continent does not have a static entrance from the overworld map. So when you leave the floating continent, the only way it can return you to the map is to put you at your last known XY coordinate, and on the airship. This, for some reason, also holds true if you leave because you died. So now, we have an airship way earlier than we're supposed to, and it can go places we normally can't reach at this point. In this case, our ultimate destination is Zozo, but I'm going to stop by the Colosseum Man's house to grab the hero ring, then Jidoor to heal up and buy some potions, because we're too early in the game to have relics or magic. You're also free to use in-game saves again, since we're not going to be exploiting the bug with the reload anymore. Edgar is going to have to solo Zozo, but he's thankfully retained his levels from the floating continent. Unfortunately, you are not going to have access to a shop with sprint shoes for a long time. Find Terra at the top of the tower, then regroup with your party and... Wait, what? It seems a couple of Moogles have infiltrated our party while we were running things out of order. The 10 Moogles that fight with Locke at the beginning take the place of the normal party members, and as each regular party member is recruited, their data overwrites the Moogle data. But because we skipped the recruitments for Cyan and Solace, the data in their slots are still Moogles. Also, Sabin is being a bit sneakier, but he's a Moogle too. We named him, and we saw his sprite in the flashback before escaping the sacred timeline, but his character data doesn't get set until we actually recruit him, so his level, skills, and equipment are still a Moogle. So when Solace, or Kutan, asks you to infiltrate the Empire, Edgar and Locke are the only two options who will give you real characters. Keep playing from here as normal, and once you get to the opera, Kutan will get a glow-up and switch back to Solace's sprite. However, she still will not have any equipment, and her equipment menu is disabled. This means that Edgar and Locke are going to have to carry the team through the Magitech factory. Once you get Terra back and gain control of the airship, it's time to start getting our real party back together. Make a party of Terra, Edgar, and Locke, and land the airship outside of South Figaro, but don't go into town. Now, proceed through Mount Kultz as though this were a normal playthrough, and at the end, Sabin's character data will get set and he can finally suplex that train. Also, once you get to the Returner's hideout, sprint shoes, finally! When you get to the 3 scenarios, it's important to do Sabin's scenario first. Hi Leo, hang in there, we're coming for you, buddy! Then, do Locke's scenario second. But once you ditch Kutan in favor of Solace and leave South Figaro, there's this nice airship sitting right there and no one's minding it, so let's go ahead and steal it instead of going to the cave. Take the airship to Narshe and meet with Banon, but he's asking you to go to the sealed gate instead of fight Kefka like normally happens after the scenarios. It's important you don't try to leave town through the front entrance at this point because you'll get caught in an event trigger for Banon's scenario. However, because Banon isn't in the party, the game will freeze. Instead, head up into the caves and up to the snowfield and find... hi? So, despite what Banon told us to do, we really want to fight Kefka, so go do that. Alright, now that that's out of our systems, let's go to the sealed gate like he asked. But wait, we need Terra for that and she just left, and she's no longer selectable in the party menu. So make a party of Edgar and Locke, with Edgar in front, and walk down to Figaro Castle. Edgar will wish we brought Sabin along, but don't listen to him because we don't want to do that event right now. We've got someone else to see. Oh hi, other Locke. And there's Terra! Wow, that was a lot easier than tracking her down in Zozo. Locke tells you to follow him, but leave him for now and leave the castle again. We'll get back to him later. A second copy of Locke is still in your party, so take Terra and Locke to the sealed gate. Note that Terra is still not selectable in the party menu, so you will lose her again if you try to change party members, and there's no way to get her back. The sealed gate is going to have to be completed with just Locke and Terra. Once that's done, you can take anyone to the banquet. You'll lose Terra if you change party members, but she gets forcibly added to the party after the banquet anyway, so it doesn't matter. Now we're going to play linearly for quite a while, and the only important thing is to not return to Figaro Castle until instructed. Locke is still doing important work there and should not be disturbed. Sorry, Leo, we're coming back for you, I swear! This time we're going to go to the floating continent and actually finish it. Once in the world of Ruin, we need to get as far as getting the airship, so you're okay to skip Sabin for now if you want to take Leo to that event later. The only events you can't skip are Edgar's recruitment and Setzer's recruitment, so go at least that far. Once we have the airship, we also need to get Terra back because she's key to warping back to Leo. So now that she's rocking that self-confidence, make a party of just her and land at Figaro Castle, which is going to be at Kohlingen. Have her go down to the engineer and ask him to move it to South Figaro. Then, go back upstairs and have her find out that Locke has spent the entire past year standing behind that right-hand door, waiting for her to follow him. Finish the scene, defeating Kefka easily and magically restoring the world of balance. Saving the world is easy when you can time travel. Take your chocobos to the South Figaro Cave, and... oh yeah, we kind of skipped the ending of Locke's scenario way back when, didn't we? And now we're left to select Banon's scenario. Except, there's been some change in leadership while everything was going on. You're probably sitting here wondering, why? Well, remember how we had those Moogles in the party before? This happens for the same reason. Banon and Leo shared the same guest party member slot. But we played the game out of order, so that Leo was actually the most recent guest party member loaded into the slot before we got here. So now when it loads the guest into the party for this scenario, you get Leo instead of Banon. Alright, we've got him. Now what? Well, we did still want to go through the cave to South Figaro, so do that. Once you get to South Figaro, get on the ferry to Nikia. But this ferry is taking you to a much darker and stranger place than you think. The end of the event at Figaro Castle explicitly calls the World of Balance map to load when you emerge on your chocobos. But the South Figaro ferry checks which overworld you're supposed to be on when it loads the ship, so it will transport you back accordingly. Now take the ferry back to South Figaro and walk to the castle in Figaro Desert. This is why we had Terra move it earlier before reshaping the world. Take the castle back to Kohlingen, where your airship awaits. And there you have it! Leo, in your party, mostly fully usable, with some notable exceptions. You still can't teach him magic or change his equipment, so no extra offering for you. You can put him on a chocobo, but because the guest character's sprite sheets don't contain an entry for riding, it will visually glitch when he turns sideways. If you take him to the Colosseum, he will instantly lose with the message Banon fell, because I guess Banon's ghost is cursing him for taking his place on the raft or something. Also, because he's not a real party member, if you go into the party select screen, you will lose him completely because you can't select him again. This means he will be forever stuck in a party with Terra and Edgar, plus one more character of your choice if you go recruit them after this. However, because of the party select limitation, he cannot be taken to the Phoenix Cave or the final dungeon because they force a party change on entry. But, that's still better than him being lost for good, and you can still use him through a good chunk of the World of Ruin. This glitch works on the original Super Nintendo version, and I have been told also on the Game Boy Advance and PlayStation Anthology versions due to them still being the same underlying code. However, I have not personally tested it on anything other than the SNES. But then, in 2022, the Pixel Remaster was released, which did rewrite all the underlying code, meaning the airship glitch would no longer work. So instead of playing to the floating continent, dying, and then reloading dirty save data in order to save Leo, we were going to have to come up with a new method. That new method being playing to the floating continent, dying, and then reloading dirty save data. Maybe you're saying, but it's not 1994 anymore. The Pixel Remaster is what's available now, so can I use the airship glitch in that? Unfortunately, no. Unlike most of the other ports, which were functionally emulations of the original Super Nintendo code, the Pixel Remaster completely reworked the base game engine. Now there's autosaves, and enough memory for every playable character to exist independently, so there's no doubling up on party slots like before. But while it took Elephant Gun 15 years after the game's original release to post about how to get Leo via the airship glitch, Japanese YouTube streamer Eddie found an endlessly exploitable glitch in the Pixel Remaster after only about 2 months. He dubbed it Bakuen Kente, or Trial by Explosion, due to him originally timing the glitch off of the explosions around the airship. Later, Japanese YouTuber Rain demonstrated how to use Bakuen Kente to get Leo. For our purposes, I'm just going to call the glitch the title screen glitch, since it's more descriptive for English-speaking audiences. This glitch can only be performed on the PC version of the Pixel Remaster due to requiring mouse input in some places. Broadly, what the title screen glitch does is allow for event code from one save file to execute within the context of another file. We're going to be exploiting this multiple times in order to get Leo, so hopefully through example this behavior will become more clear. First, we need to prepare 4 save files. I would highly suggest making multiple copies of each, because with all the save load navigation we're going to be doing, it's going to be easy to accidentally overwrite one when you intended to load it. Not that I'm speaking from experience or anything. The first save file should be at the save point in the Esper Cave before the 3 trap doors, the last place you can save before you control Leo. The second save file should be somewhere in the World of Balance after you've finished the Thamasa quest, but before you've gone to the Floating Continent for the first time. The third save file should be outside the Colosseum in the World of Ruin after you've gotten your airship. This third file is also going to be your base save, meaning it's the save that Leo will eventually be summoned into. Therefore, Leo's level is going to be based on this save's average party level. Also, while in the Super Nintendo version of the glitch, Leo came with all his gear, in this version you need to have it ready for him. So, in this base save, you also need to ensure that you've gotten the Master Scroll from the Ancient Castle, the Aegis Shield from Mount Zozo, as well as the Crystal Sword, Gold Helmet, Gold Armor, and Gigas Glove. These items also need to be available in your inventory and not equipped on another character. Otherwise, Leo will be summoned into this party without that equipment, and at least in the case of the Master Scroll and Gigas Glove, you won't be able to equip it later. Finally, the fourth save just needs to be in the World of Ruin by Figaro Castle, but the levels, party, and equipment don't matter. The first save we're going to load is Save 2, before the Floating Continent. Make a party of your weakest characters and don't bother to equip them, because we need them to die a lot. As soon as you're able to move on the airship deck, walk back and forth 4 times. On the 4th time, when you get back to the helm, open the menu and set your cursor memory to on. Then, quick save and return to the title screen. The reason we're doing this is because the battle on the airship deck starts on a timer. The timer expires in the time it takes for you to walk back and forth about 4.5 times. We're going to be going back to this battle many times, so it's just convenient to have a quick save available right before it starts, so you don't have to go through the cutscene over and over. Note that you can only do 1 quick save at a time across all save files, so don't use any other quick saves or it will overwrite this one. Now we're going to pick Save 1, in the Esper Cave. Fall through the bottom trapdoor, and proceed to just inside the entrance to the cave where the scene with the Espers plays, but don't walk far enough to trigger the scene. Instead, return to the title screen. The game creates an autosave every time you enter a new map screen, so now we have an autosave in the Esper Cave and a quick save on the airship. Now, reload the quick save from the airship. As soon as it finishes loading, open the menu and place the cursor on Configuration, Return to Title Screen, but don't actually select it. We just want to set this as the cursor's memory position, so we can select it quickly in a moment. Now, quickly exit and enter the menu repeatedly. The goal is to open the menu at the exact same moment that the event starts and the dialog box appears. This takes frame-perfect timing, so you're going to be messing this up. A lot. In the case that you do mess up, just let the battle start and die. The recent 1.1.0 update that was released after I recorded this footage made this even easier, by allowing you to just return to the title screen from the pause menu rather than needing to wait to die. But in this instance, I'm going to go ahead and die just to show you what it looks like. You can see that the suggested recent save data to load is our autosave in the Esper Cave, rather than anything we were just doing. This will be important later. But for now, say no, and just return to the title screen and reload your quick save to try again. And again and again. I assure you it will take many tries, so don't feel bad. Oh cool, I did it! When the glitch works, you will see that the event dialog box is overlaid on the menu screen. While this is up, quickly select Configuration, Return to Title Screen, but keep the title screen dialog up. It should advance to the battle, but if it doesn't, click the mouse on the event dialog box in the background and it will proceed. Now that we're in the battle, you see that the title screen dialog is still up. However, the controller and keyboard controls have shifted focus to the battle window, so they can't control the title screen dialog. So use the controller input to make yourself die in this battle. After you die, although you can't really see it because the title screen dialog is covering it, it's asking if you want to reload your autosave. Remember, our autosave is in the Esper Cave. This time, select Yes, which will be the default option even though you can't see it. So now we've loaded back into the Esper Cave, with the title screen dialog still up. The controller is still in control of the background screen, so use the minimap in the upper right corner to navigate down until you trigger the event to start. Let the event play until after the screen fades out and back in. Once Strago starts talking, use the mouse to click Yes twice on the Return to Title Screen prompt. This will then return you to the title screen. Something you are normally not allowed to do while an event is playing. We'll see in a moment what that does. Now select Save 3, our base save, in front of the Coliseum that has all of Leo's default gear in our inventory. Head into the Coliseum and talk to this thief on the left. You will see that the dialogue from the event in the Esper Cave continues to play. When you exit to the title screen in the middle of an event and load a new save, it appears the event queue doesn't get cleared. So that event's code continues to execute in this new save. The sprites also don't know what to do with themselves anymore, apparently. Wait for the dialogue event to finish, where they suggest going to meet with General Leo. Yes, let's go meet General Leo. However, in this timeline, Leo perhaps senses something is amiss before he enters town, and decides to nope out. Hooray, he escaped! Except, at the moment, he's still stuck on Crescent Island with no access to an airship, so you can't do much with him. So just save this game to a new file for now. We'll come rescue him in a minute. Exit back to the title screen and load your fourth file, in the World of Ruin outside of Figaro Castle. Head inside and down the left stairway to the engineer's room, then exit to the title screen. This is now our new autosave. Now go back to your quick save on the airship, because we're going to need to do the title screen glitch again. Once you've got your title screen prompt up, do as before and confirm loading the autosave after you die. You'll end up in the Figaro Castle engineer's room with the title screen prompt up. Use the minimap to navigate to the engineer, who's standing between the two pillars, and then talk to him. When the prompt comes up to go to Cullingan, don't select it, but instead use the mouse to click twice on Yes on the title screen prompt to return to the title screen. Now load the save data with Leo outside of Thamasa. He's having a rough time out here, it seems. Once the loading finishes, Leo will get teleported to the Figaro Desert. You'll notice there's no music playing and no castle to be found because the game is still in a weird state. So get in a random battle, and Leo will win without having to do anything because he's just that good. After that, the Figaro moving sequence will play, and Leo will now be the one in the party in the engineer's room. Once he arrives at Cullingan, check his equipment to make sure he doesn't have anything empty. If he does, you were either missing something or someone else was equipped with it in your base save. Walk him up to the airship, which will be next to the Coliseum. The airship is next to the Coliseum and not Cullingan because this is still ultimately save file 3. The only thing we're taking from the other save files is the event queue. We pulled the event queue from the Esper Cave into save file 3 to force it to warp us to Thamasa and add Leo to the party. Then we pulled the event queue from Figaro into that same save to make it warp us back to Figaro. But our inventory, party levels, and airship coordinates were unaffected. If this was like the Super Nintendo version of the glitch, this would be the end of it, since Leo's equipment and magic are still disabled like before. So normally all you'd be able to do from here is take him to the remaining events you want to, using his default equipment and abilities. But in Pixel Remaster, we have a method to get around that. And seeing as I am now going to Kohlingen, entering a new map, and then returning to the title screen without saving in order to generate a new autosave, guess what that method is? Time to bang our head against the airship a bunch more. Except this time, we're going to do it a little different. Instead of saving the cursor position on Configuration, Return to Title Screen, we're going to save it on Abilities Espers. You see that it takes 3 clicks to select Abilities, the character, Espers, so remember that. When you get the glitch, click 3 times and you should briefly see the cursor on Ramuh before the battle starts. This time around, there's no overlay during the battle, so it's not immediately obvious something happened. So die and load your autosave as normal. When your Leo save loads, open the menu and you'll notice the Esper menu briefly flashes. Go down and select Abilities and you'll find that it's currently unlocked. It also shows that he's already mastered all of them, and while Leo is cool like that, it's lying to you. But this means that we can give him stat gains that he normally wouldn't have access to. Let's give him Odin for that tasty speed +2. You can switch his Esper later, but you're going to have to run this version of the glitch every time you do it, because access to the abilities menu is a one-time deal. If you get in a battle, it will tell you that Leo instantly learned Meteor, and while Leo is still cool like that, it's still lying to you. However, when he levels up and it tells you he gained speed +2, that's the truth. You can use the glitch the same way on the equipment menu, but there's some limitations. To set this up, set the cursor memory to equip like we did with abilities, then select it when you trigger the glitch. When you load back your autosave, instead of opening Leo's menu directly, you need to talk to one of the shopkeepers instead. It's really hard to see, but you'll notice that when you open the shop screen, Gao's equipment menu opened behind it. You can barely see Gao's name right here, plus the Optimize command above it. When I click Optimize once with the mouse, you see the background cursor move to it. When I click it again, you see Gao's name change to Leo. Exit out of this menu and go check Leo's equipment. He's now got the Ultima weapon and Genji helm, as well as the crystal shield and mail. Because you can only change his equipment with the Optimize command, which does not affect relics, there's no way to get the Master Scroll off him, or give him a Genji glove alongside it. But he is still more customizable in this version of the glitch than he was in the Super Nintendo version. Another thing to note is that Leo has no equipment restrictions. He can wear anything, including female-only gear such as the Minerva bustier, or Relm's cat ear hood, or Umaro's snow scarf. So you can buff his stats to the max with espers and restricted equipment, and make him look absolutely ridiculous while doing so. Also, even though the message window is lying to you about him learning a spell the first time you equip him with an esper, if you keep gaining the necessary magic AP with him, he will learn that spell for real, and can use it in battle. The only thing to note is that his MP is hidden, and is 0 by default, so you need to heal him in an inn or with a tent to restore it. You also can take him to the Colosseum and beat up monsters for their items, without Banon's ghost coming to haunt him. However, unlike the Super Nintendo version, you can't put him on a chocobo, because he still has no riding sprite. The Pixel Remaster actually did fix Banon's sprite when he originally had the same issue, but it didn't fix Leo's. Likely because Banon has a legitimate opportunity to ride a chocobo in the stable south of Figaro Desert, but Leo doesn't. But now instead of just visually glitching, your chocobo grows a second head, and it also freezes the game. You can take him to Cyan's Dream, just don't have him as the party lead during the Magitech armor sequence, as it will have the same issue. However, the riding sprite is not used during battle, so Leo won't have a problem there. Except he does not get the Magitech command either, and still just has shock. Oh darn. Finally, and probably most importantly, Leo is selectable in the party menu in the Pixel Remaster, meaning you can put him in whatever party composition you want, and even leave him behind, and he'll still be there available later. Just don't choose a party-wide unequip that would apply to him, because he'll lose his relics and can't get them back. Also, the Party Select menu still only has 14 slots available, and Leo will always be at the end. So if you recruit every other character, Leo gets pushed off the end and is no longer selectable. However, if you ditch Gao on the Veldt, you can get him back. Otherwise, you can just not recruit one character and Leo will replace them. Sorry, Strago. But this means you can take him to the Phoenix Cave and Final Dungeon. And if Leo is the party leader of the first party in Kefka's tower, he gets to be the one to lecture Kefka on love. He's also available in the Final Battle roster, so go ahead and let him avenge himself. So aside from the Chocobo glitch and the inability to change his relics or fine-tune his equipment, Leo is much closer to behaving like a real party member in the Pixel Remaster than he was in the SNES. But is this really getting Leo in your party, you complain? You still have to glitch out the game to do it, and none of the other characters even notice him. I want Leo to join my party for real, and for the story to acknowledge that he's actually there. Well, sorry, because as explained in the intro, the game as written does not allow for that in any version. So if that's what you really want, we're going to have to delve into the realm of... If the code as written does not allow for Leo to be a fully realized party member, then the obvious solution is change the code. The assembly code for the Super Nintendo version of Final Fantasy VI has been fully documented for some time, allowing those with the time and know-how to change pretty much any aspect of the game. This includes rewriting events to make Leo a regular party member, unlocking his equipment, and adding him to scenes where he wasn't originally present. There are several ROM hacks available that make Leo playable beyond what he was originally, depending on what sort of experience you're looking for. Some hacks make Leo playable in more areas than he was originally, but still don't make him a full party member. In Recast FF3 War of the Magitek by Seadude, Leo accompanies the party on the Crescent Island trip and has a Jujutsu command rather than Shock, which casts a random special attack. In this hack, the character and monster sprites have also all been redone, and some characters are swapped around. However, Leo is still ultimately killed by Kefka as he was in the original, so isn't a permanent party addition. In Return of the Dark Sorcerer by Guy Nadik, most of the game's original cast has been recast with other characters, as well as a whole host of other changes. But Leo is still there in his original role, albeit he's now a Magitek cyborg with Magitek abilities. Leo gets to participate in more battles in this hack as well, including a new fight with Leviathan on the boat trip to Crescent Island. But he still meets his end, though in a slightly different manner, and does not join the party permanently. For hacks that make Leo a permanent party member, the first one to do so was the General Leo edition by Fauntleroy back in 2013. This hack is fairly basic in its execution, in that other than having you recruit Leo in Thamasa instead of him dying, it doesn't alter much else about the surrounding game aside from some quality of life improvements. A Soldier's Contingency by Lightning Hunter uses the General Leo edition as its base, but also updates all of the character sprites, adds new monsters, and redoes some of the gameplay mechanics, among many other changes. Divergent Paths by Power Panda was originally written to reorganize the narrative, specifically rebalancing the content of the 3 scenarios, and also to expand each character's story. It also expands the party roster from 14 to 16, allowing Leo to join as a permanent member without having to replace any of the existing characters. Antinomia Final Fantasy VI by Fast Moon elevates Leo to a secondary protagonist. It gives him several playable between-the-scenes events in the World of Balance to explore what he was up to while the main story was going on. Then, based on player choices, he has the ability to become a fully recruitable member in the World of Ruin. Full disclosure, this is my hack, but this is also my video, and I permit myself to self-promote. But a ROM hack is basically just glorified fanfiction, you complain. Not to mention questionably legal. I want Leo in my party, fully functional, acknowledged by the story, and officially released by Square Enix. Well, I've got some bad news for you. General Leo has made an appearance in several spin-off titles, all of them being mobile gacha games. Final Fantasy Record Keeper and Final Fantasy Brave Exvius both have him as a playable unit, but he has little to no story presence and just exists as a gacha draw. Record Keeper also ended global service in September 2022. The Japanese version is still running as of this video, however, it will inevitably reach end of service as well. Dissidia Final Fantasy Opera Omnia is the only official game where Leo has appeared as a full party member and had his presence specifically acknowledged by the story. It's also the only game where he is voiced and rendered as a 3D model. Unfortunately, that game ended service in February 2024. Therefore, even though he does exist in other games, it is only in a transient state, as they are all live service games that either already have, or will, become unavailable to play. But it's almost fitting, really, that in all the struggles we've gone through in order to get Leo, he is, officially, still ultimately a temporary presence, doomed to be lost. Maybe that should teach us to cherish what we have in the time we have it, and learn to accept it when it's gone. Nah, if they do actually come out with that remake in 20 years, we are totally going to figure out how to get him back in that version too. Thanks for watching.